Thank you all for coming to my final speech tonight. I want to start with a short little story. In 1347, there was a little boat that docked at the Sicilian port of Messina. On top or aboard the boat, most of the sailors were dead, and those that were not were covered head to toe in these black boils that were covered, filled with pus, blood, disgusting stuff that you don't want to see. The Sicilian authorities hastily tried to shoo the nasty people away. You don't want that in your country or whatever. So they tried to, but it was too late. The Black Plague had already left the boat and was already infecting people. Now, with this being said, you might ask yourself, how did this little plague, this bacterial plague, affect people, and how did it get from people? How was it so effective? How did it kill so many people, Lucky for you, I have the answers right here. All right. So, my first point with the transmission. Most people know, because it's taught in school, that the black rats aboard the ship, they infected each other through bites, through blood, and through the air, But it's actually a misconception that the rats were, responsible for all this death. It wasn't really the rats, it was really the humans, and I'll get into that later. But the rats were the ones that brought it to the people, and the black rats like being around people, so that's why it went through them. So, with the death toll, in total, there were about 25 million people that died in Europe within the 2 years that the Black Plague had stricken. Now, to help put that into perspective, some of y'all know the Grace Sanctuary. It can sit about 2,400 people. Mm-hmm. Now, imagine that times about 40, which is 80,000. 80,000 is about the number that died with the atomic bomb with Truman when he dropped it, only on impact. 80,000. That's a lot of people. Now, take it up one step further, the Holocaust with Hitler. There's no exact number because it was hard to gauge how many people had died, but experts believe it's around 6 million. 6 million, 25 million. You'd think a lot of people died in the Holocaust. There's a lot more within the Black Plague that died. And so now you might be asking, okay, that's a lot of death. How did people cope with people constantly dropping every day? I'll tell you that too. A lot of people believed, because they were really religious back then, they believed this was an act of God and it was like God's punishment on these people. So with that being said, they tried to cleanse their communities of heretics and troublemakers. So if you had a teenage boy who drank too much or who skipped school, they would kick you out the community. But this also led to the massacre of thousands of Jews because, and so the Jewish people, they had to flee to the country. And so the second way they coped with it are these people called flagellants. Flagellants are like a circus. They're a group of people that would stay in a town for about a month, and they would publicly humiliate themselves by whipping themselves with the things, Jesus Christ was whipped with, the bones and everything. And so this actually surprisingly brought people, not pleasure, but comfort, seeing other people being in pain for some reason, but it was temporary. It was until the Pope at the time, he said, okay, this can't be good, for people. That's when people started backtracking. They were like, okay, maybe this isn't good. And so that's when that started dying out. And with the third way they coped with all this death is just get away from it. Act like it didn't happen. They would move from the cities to the country because they didn't know, back then, bacterial, it travels pretty fast, all that. So they didn't know that, so they would try to move to the country, but it would still follow them. So with all that being said, the Black Death could have been not as bad if people knew a little bit more. With the modern technology we have today, we would have been able to keep the death tolls down, But back then, they would have unsanitary practices, like after surgery, they'd use the same tools without washing them, or they wouldn't wash their hands, all that cross-contamination. So if they hadn't been so ignorant or looked into a little bit more and known a little bit more about bacteria, the Black Death would not have been such, one of the biggest epidemics we've ever seen. Thank you all for coming tonight, and I hope you have a great one.